This is a basic review of the Capstan UT operating interface. This particular one is pulled up on an Ag Leader Insight, although no matter what controller you're pulled up on, the virtual terminal interface is going to be the same. So if we look at the overall layout that we have on this UT screen, the first field we have here is your target rate in liters per hectare. Next one is you have your speed, which is coming from the GPS off the ISO bus. That's in kilometers per hour. The next field over here we have is our pressure, which is defaulted here to 276 kPa, or around 40 psi. The next item is our system status. There's a variety of things in here like boom overlap on and off, pump on and off. This is where we enable and disable our key fob. The next thing we have down is our area meter, where we count hectares or acres. And just below that, we have our gallon counter, where we count the product in the tank, and that includes both the fill flow meter and the product flow meter if the sprayer is equipped with a fill flow meter. And down at the bottom, we have something very similar to what you're used to seeing on a PinPoint 2 system, and that is we have these different boom profiles down here that we can set up to put a little bit more flow out of one nozzle or a little less out of another nozzle. So we can go into our nozzle setup and we can set up these boom profiles for different tips, different wheel track profiles. However we want to utilize those, just as we did with PinPoint 2, we can utilize those with PinPoint 3. One of the big differentiators in using these boom profiles is with PinPoint 2, you had to program in the nozzle size. So if you ran 3 or 4 different nozzle sizes, you would actually have to come into your boom 1 profile. You would have to program whichever nozzle you were using for that boom profile, and then it was attached to that boom profile. So then if you were changing nozzles on your sprayer, you would then have to change your boom profiles. One of the areas where PinPoint 3 differs is we actually broke the boom profile away from the tip size. So you can now set your nozzle size independent of your boom profile, which gives you a lot more flexibility in setting up your boom profiles and also knowing what nozzle size you have it set to currently. So you can see down here that this currently says custom in this far left-hand field. So that means that when you select boom 1 profile, it's looking for the custom nozzle size that you programmed into that boom profile. Same thing with boom 2 or boom 5, whichever one you select. When that field says custom, it's always looking for the nozzle size that's programmed into the boom profile. If we want to decouple that and just run a profile and the nozzle size independently, we can come over here to this custom and we can click on that field, and you can see that it now says that I'm running a 3.0 nozzle, or if I click on it again, a 4.0 nozzle or a number 5 nozzle. So by clicking on this field right here, we can very easily switch nozzle sizes without having to change the boom profile, and we also know what nozzle size that we're on at that point in time. So that is one nice feature, is the nozzle size can be coupled to the profile, or it can be detached from the profile, however you choose to operate that. The next field up here is liters per hectare. So if I click on this liters per hectare box, the common setting is to have this at RX. And what that means is it's grabbing the target rate off of the ISO bus from whatever terminal that you're using. Now, you don't have to choose that. You can choose R1, which says I'm going to use rate 1 that's programmed into the envelope. I can choose rate 2, which means I'm going to use the second target rate that's programmed into the envelope. You can click on these fields and you could change that target rate to also be 100. Again, the most common way to do this is to set that to RX, where it looks for the rate off of the ISO bus. You can also set a rate bump feature in here where you can increase and decrease that rate. Now, right now it says the rate on the bus is set to 100 liters per hectare. So if I actually come over here and I look at my rate controller, you can see that target rate 1 is set to 100 liters per hectare. That's where it's grabbing this from the native application that's being broadcast across the bus. If I happen to select target rate 2 and I come back down here into my UT, you will see that that RX rate is now at 80. So again, it's just going out there and looking on the bus, grabbing whatever target rate is out there. This flow meter error percent number here, the PinPoint calculates what the flow rate should be based off of pressure, nozzle size, duty cycle, and speed. And it looks at what the flow meter is reporting the flow to be. So in this way, you have a device that lets you know if your flow meter is operating correctly or not. It goes out there and it looks and it tells you how close the flow meter is to the calculation. And typically we want this value to be less than 10%, and as long as it's within that, the calculation and the flow meter error are tracking very close, and that's a good indicator that all of the flows and everything are going to line up. The field below this is your nozzle duty cycle, or this is the percent duty cycle that your nozzles are currently operating at. And just below that, we also have a purge feature where you can click on the purge feature. Right now I get a negative 100% flow meter error because this is a benchtop simulator and I don't actually have a flow meter hooked into it. So it's saying 0 flow meter, but it's calculating a flow because I have a pressure and obviously fluid coming out of the boom. So, but when you hit that purge button, it just turns all the nozzles on, purges the boom at 50% duty cycle. You can click that off and it turns that off as well. So that's how we work within the target rate field. You have the speed field, which is mostly just a feedback field to allow you to see what the speed is being broadcast across the bus. If you wanted to put in a self-test speed, you could come into this box. You could click on this self-test speed. You could enter a self-test speed in here and operate it that way. Next field is your pressure field. When we click on that, again, just like the rate field, we have a pressure setting 1, a pressure setting 2. We also have an RX pressure, or if the ISOBus terminal was broadcasting a target pressure across the bus, we could actually accept that. Now, that's not a very common feature that happens with ISOBus controllers. So typically with this, in the pressure settings, we're going to run P1, and we have the option to program in a second pressure if we want to run a lower or higher pressure in that field. We have a manual pressure control here where we can increase and decrease. You can see the pump PWM value here. So it's sending a signal to the pump. You can see as I hit the increase button, it's increasing the percent time that the pump is being supplied voltage. Again, my pressure is staying constant up here because I have a simulated pressure into this on a benchtop unit. And if we're done in manual, we can program that back to R1. You can put a bump in here if you want to have a bump increment to move your pressure up and down. So very similar to operating your rate field, except in rate, we're typically going to run the RX rate, but in pressure, we're going to run our P1, P2, and set those per what we want our target pressure to be. I'm going to skip the system for now and come down to your hectares. So you have an area meter. So this is going to, count your area up as you're applying. You have the option to reset that anytime you want. It has a second counter in here if for some reason you wanted to have 2 area meters where you weren't resetting those at the same time. So you have a second counter in here. You have a lifetime counter that counts all the area that's been sprayed during the lifetime, and then bounded, sprayable, and unsprayed are not active fields at this time. The next thing that we have is the gallon counter area, or in metric, the liter counter area. So the first thing that we could do is we could program a tank capacity in here. So that might be, we'll just say 3,000 liters just for, and then we can refill that. So you can see that when I hit the refill, my current tank level goes to 3,000. Right now it's counted 242 liters have come out. I can reset that to 0 over the lifetime of using this demo, it's sprayed 54,000 liters. You can set an alarm here. You can click on this volume button right here, and you can change it to a volume that you want it to trigger off at, like 100 liters, or you can have it set to a percentage, like 5% volume of the tank. And also in this liters field, if you're live spraying, you're gonna be able to see your actual flow rate that's going through the machine right here. The last sort of part of the screen is this system status tray over here. So you have pump on off. In my demo stand setup, I can toggle that on and off right here. Now on your machine, your pump on off status is either going to come from a switch on your console or across the ISO bus from your virtual terminal. The next thing that you have is a boom on off. Again, my boom on off is going to be a little bit different than your boom on off. Your boom on off may come from a combination of the master switch and boom switches on the console. It may come from virtual section switches on the screen, but your boom on off input may be coming across the bus, whereas in this desktop simulator environment, it's just coming from my button presses here. So your boom overlap on and off, if I turn my boom overlap on and off down there, I got the warning. We're going to see that toggle on and off based off of what this actual virtual terminal is doing here. The two things that you will always turn on and off outside of the ISOBUS environment is your turn compensation. This is where you can enable and disable turn compensation, and you have your key fob down here. So just like PinPoint 2, we have the handheld key fob device where you could go turn on nozzles at the rear of the boom. In addition to having that, we also have an app that you can download on your phone and use it as the key fob device, which also includes some added functionality like controlling the pump from outside the machine as well as controlling the nozzles. So there are some additional options in key fob. If you do want to use that outside of the machine, you would have to enable that key fob and then go back and begin using the key fob on that machine. So as far as navigating the basic screens and how we use those functions, that's going to be the basics of operating on the PinPoint 3 Envelop UT home screen.